It was Valentine's Day, and Rachel and I decided to celebrate the occasion with a romantic dinner at our favorite restaurant. After a lovely night, we hopped in the car and headed home, looking forward to continuing the celebration alone. Upon arriving home, we noticed something out of place. The porch light was off, even though I was sure I had left it on before we left. Rachel looked around, but everything seemed normal otherwise. We entered the house and Rachel tried to turn on the lights, but nothing happened. The electricity was out, so I grabbed a flashlight and started checking the breakers. Suddenly a strange sound came from upstairs. It was as if something was moving in the attic. Rachel looked at me, her eyes wide with fear. We exchanged a quick glance and decided to investigate. We climbed the stairs slowly, each step creaking under our feet. I pushed open the attic door and turned on the flashlight. The beam of light revealed a pile of dusty boxes and old furniture, but nothing else. We breathed a sigh of relief, convinced that our imagination was running wild. We went back downstairs and decided to settle in for the night. However, as the night wore on, the strange sounds persisted. Scratching on the walls, creaks on the floor, small noises that seemed to come from every corner of the house. Rachel and I tried to ignore the sounds and focus on each other, but the feeling of discomfort only grew. Finally, we decided to investigate one more time. This time, Rachel noticed something peculiar. The basement door, which was normally locked, was slightly ajar. I frowned, puzzled. We exchanged hesitant looks before venturing downstairs to investigate. The darkness of the basement enveloped us as we descended the dusty stairs. My flashlight illuminated the stone walls, revealing stacks of antiques and forgotten boxes. That's when we heard a sound coming from a dark corner of the basement. A soft dragging, followed by an indistinct whisper. Rachel grabbed my arm, her heart racing. We hesitated for a moment, then I decided to investigate. We advanced slowly toward the sound, the flashlight trembling in my hand. But before we could get any closer, the basement door slammed shut, making us jump in fright. A click echoed through the basement as the door was locked from the outside. Rachel clung to my arm, and we looked at each other, fear reflected in our eyes. Without a word, we hid behind the stacks of boxes, trying to control our breathing as we listened to heavy footsteps echoing upstairs in the house. Time seemed to drag on as we sat there, motionless and silent, waiting. Every noise made us shiver, every sound filled us with apprehension. After what felt like an eternity, the footsteps finally faded away, and silence returned, heavy and oppressive. With our nerves on edge, Rachel picked up the phone and dialed my father for help in a tense whisper. She quickly explained the situation while I remained vigilant to the sounds around us. My father promised to call the police immediately and send them to help us. Rachel and I hugged each other, trying to comfort ourselves as we waited. Every second felt like an eternity until we finally heard the reassuring sounds of sirens approaching. The police arrived and rescued us from the basement, taking us to the safety of the lit street. After a brief interrogation, the police assured us that the house was empty and secure, and left us in the hands of my father, who took us home. I've always been a big fan of the great outdoors, so as Valentine's Day was getting closer, I decided to surprise my girlfriend Jess with a romantic getaway to a cozy cabin tucked away in the mountains. It seemed like the perfect spot for a chill night under the stars, or so I thought. We got to the cabin just before sundown. The view of the mountains around us was breathtaking, but there was something in the air that made me feel uneasy, a vibe like we weren't alone out there. Jess was stoked about spending a night away from the city, but as darkness swallowed up the scenery, things started feeling heavier. The crackling fireplace wasn't enough to soothe my jumpy nerves. We tried to distract ourselves with board games and tunes, but something was off. Weird noises echoed through the woods like something was watching us from the shadows. Jess tried to reassure me, but her eyes showed the same fear I felt. We decided to hit the hay, hoping sleep would shake off our fears, but we could barely shut our eyes. Every noise outside seemed louder than the last, every shadow at the window creepier than before. That's when we heard someone trying to open the door. It was a cautious attempt, like whoever was outside didn't want to be noticed. My heart raced, and Jess held onto me tight. I got up cautiously and approached the door. The dim moonlight cast eerie shadows on the wooden floor. I swallowed hard and asked who was there. Silence was the only response I got. We decided to ignore the door rattling and try to get back to sleep. But the night just got worse. The noises kept coming, and the feeling of being watched got stronger by the minute. Finally, we couldn't take it anymore. We decided to bail on the cabin that very night, no matter how late it was. Jess grabbed her stuff in a hurry, and I did the same, feeling a brief relief as we stepped out the door. That's when we saw a figure standing in the middle of the path leading to the road. It was a dark silhouette, watching us with gleaming eyes. We froze, the air thick around us. We didn't stick around to see anything else. We sprinted down the dark trail, our hearts pounding, until we reached our car. Only when we were a safe distance away did we dare to glance back. The figure had vanished, but the feeling that something terrible was watching us lingered. We drove down the dark road, leaving the haunted cabin behind and swearing never to come back.
It was Valentine's Day, and Emily and I decided to celebrate the occasion with a romantic dinner at a fancy restaurant downtown. Little did we know that night would turn into a terrifying experience we'd never forget. As we enjoyed our meal, Emily and I noticed a creepy guy sitting at the bar, whose intense stare made us uneasy. He seemed to radiate a sense of unease, and we tried to ignore him, focusing on our own romance. However, things took a turn when the eerie man got up from the bar and walked close to our table. He locked eyes with Emily and me, making a threatening gesture like he was slashing his throat with his finger. A chill ran down our spines. Without saying a word, the guy walked out of the restaurant and stood outside, staring right at our table. Emily and I exchanged worried glances, not understanding what was going on. We decided to call the restaurant manager and report the man's threatening behavior. When the manager and the security guard went to check, they found that the man had disappeared without a trace. With our hearts still racing, Emily and I left the restaurant, thankful to be safe. But as we got closer to home, we spotted the same creepy guy nearby, watching us with piercing eyes. Without hesitation, I stepped on the gas and drove to the nearest police station. There, we reported the incident to the authorities, receiving assurance that the police would investigate the case. Afraid of what might happen, Emily and I decided to spend the night at her sister's house, away from the reach of the mysterious man. The night was filled with restlessness and fear, but thankfully, the threatening man was never seen again.